What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Chill, where every single week I, Graham G.S. Matthews, break down all the original content I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking the latest episode of WWE Untold that aired on Friday night on the network, called Team Hell No is on Fire. They did call it at the beginning of the episode Team Hell No catches fire, but either way, it's about Team Hell No. This is a very good show. I don't think gets the attention it deserves. They kind of air the episodes randomly on the network. This aired at like fucking 8 o'clock on a Friday. They never really air it like after Raw or after a pay-per-view. They don't really promote it too much on Raw and on SmackDown and on WWE TV just in general. You kind of have to go out of your way to find it. But the episodes that I have seen on Sting, on Shane McMahon versus Kurt Angle from 2001, on Eddie Guerrero, on the Mankind Undertaker Hell in a Cell match, have all been great. And this one's no different. I could see why this would get lost in the shuffle just because there's been so much new network content in the last week. You know, between the Table of Three, the Table of Honor episode that I talked about on Friday, they had the TakeOver Prime Target Toronto thing go up on like Thursday, Friday, and I talked about that yesterday. I had a TakeOver on Saturday night. They had the Chronicle on Seth Rollins debut after TakeOver last night, which I'll talk about tomorrow here on the channel. They had the new 24 go up after SummerSlam, or will have that going up tonight after SummerSlam on the network. So I could see why people wouldn't even really know this was a thing, but it's well worth checking out, especially if you were a fan of Team Hell No back when they first came together in late 2012. They kicked off the special with Kane talking about how being a psychotic monster can be a really tough thing to do. Just because you go your entire career trying to get people to hate you, doing all these different crazy psychotic things, that it can be tough to come up with new things to do after a while. And Kane had been a crazy person in storyline since he debuted in 1997. And he had done, some lighthearted stuff along the way. But for the better part of those 15 years, from 97 to 2012, he was the same old monster character. And you could just tell from him talking here that he was ready for something new at that point. But little did he know that something new would end up being a tag team with Daniel Bryan, of all people. Speaking of Daniel Bryan, he did say here that he actually watched Kane debut as a wrestling fan, in high school, back in 1997 when he debuted at the Bad Blood pay-per-view in that Hell in a Cell match between Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker. And then he ended up getting to team with him, 15 years later. How crazy is that? They talk about, they recall talking with each other during like a WWE tour in Mexico on the bus, and they were very, similar in the ways that they thought and the things that they, certain things that they, talked about, and they had a lot of similar interests is basically what I'm saying here. They really gelled just from the get-go. And they got along in the beginning, even before Daniel Bryan and him started teaming. When Bryan first arrived in the company in 2010, they got along even at that point. They didn't really start to become friends until they started downtowning people. I didn't really know what this was before I heard Daniel Bryan talk about it. And I think I had heard them, maybe bring it up. I've either seen footage of it or I'd seen them talk about it, either in a network documentary or something like that. Maybe it wasn't Daniel Bryan's documentary, but I've definitely heard them talking about this before, where they would downtown people. So there was a song called Downtown. I forgot the artist, but it was like some really random song, like not a wrestling song, not a rock song. It was like this really, catchy, lighthearted, female sung song. I forgot what it was, but who it was by anyway. But it was called Downtown. And maybe you're familiar with it. I forgot who it's by. But what they would do, and Bryan admits that this isn't exactly sanitary, they would play the song on someone's phone and then throw it under the bottom of a bathroom stall so the person sitting on the toilet pooping would have to listen to the Downtown song while they're going to the bathroom, while they're relieving themselves, which again sounds absolutely disgusting, but kind of funny at the same time. So then Bryan one time had done this to Kane. Kane had come backstage from one of his matches, ready to get to his bag. He gets inside the locker room, lights are off, lights go on, he sees all these chairs and all this luggage and whatever else blocking him, between him, blocking him from getting to his luggage. And while he had to take all this stuff down, was Bryan's phone in the background playing Downtown. Bryan thought it was the funniest thing. Kane at first was upset. Actually, where I might have heard this story on, what's it called? Storytime. The WWE Storytime show, that's maybe where I've heard this before, because I've definitely heard something along these lines where Bryan had talked about this. It must have been Storytime a few years ago. But anyway, Bryan has this, just stupid grin on his face, and Kane turns around, sees Bryan, and he just sighs. And he's not mad anymore, but he just sighs, and he's like, you're all right, kid. And that's how they became friends, which is really, really funny. And they were friends backstage. They talk about, Kane mentions how, there's a lot of tag teams that are together, or at least, they were years ago, that didn't even really like each other. And the first team that I thought of was Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. Just by all accounts, it didn't really seem like they were friends. And maybe I'm wrong for the time they were teaming together for. Again, I might be wrong on that, but it seemed like that was a thing back in the day where tag team partners wouldn't exactly be best friends. I think Bobby Roode and James Storm and TNA as Beer Money were kind of the same way. James Storm, I think, or him or Roode or someone talked about it in an interview in the last couple of years where they said they don't really keep in contact at all, despite the fact they teamed for so long on and off for like close to a decade. They're not really that close of friends backstage, which is really surprising to me. But Kane and Bryan were. They were very good friends backstage, and that's really what helped make the team work that much more. So they also talked about how, some people request to be a tag team. In their case, it was just thrust upon them. It really just kind of came out of nowhere in the summer of 2012. So to go back a bit, as Bryan recalls here, in the summer of 2012, that was when his character lost his mind. Now, he had turned heel months before this, in early 2012, when he was World Heavyweight Champion. He didn't really start to go crazy until after he lost the World Heavyweight Championship in 8 seconds at WrestleMania. That's when the yes chant really took off, and that's when he started doing the no to combat it, which didn't really work because people still did the yes anyway, or the no, or whatever. They went along with Daniel Bryan because they loved him that much. And he had that series of matches with Punk over the WWE title, failed to win the championship. He was supposed to get married to AJ Lee at Raw 1000. That fell through. She left him at the altar. He continued to lose his mind. Speaking of Raw 1000, Bryan talked about how on that show the seeds were planted for him to face, of all people, Charlie Sheen at SummerSlam 2012. I remember this very clearly because I remember watching that show, seeing the build begin for Bryan and Sheen at SummerSlam, thinking, really, why are they doing this? But at the same time, it's a great opportunity to give Bryan more exposure. I mean, facing a celebrity like Charlie Sheen, the guy was a fucking train wreck at that point. I mean, it got to the point where before Raw 1000, he was supposed to be like the celebrity ambassador for Raw 1000. He deleted his Twitter account. He was supposed to be tweeting during the show. He deleted his account before the show. And they were scrambling to figure out another way to have him appear on the show in some form or fashion. So they created a Skype account for him. I think he appeared via maybe Tout, definitely Skype, during Raw 1000. And he went back and forth with Daniel Bryan. But the thing is, they never had Sheen sign a contract for the match. So they were building to something that never even ended up happening. I remember they had done a few more weeks of build for it where they had plugged Anger Management, Bryan's show, or a Charlie Sheen show, on Raw, and they had Bryan go through anger management courses. I think that's why they started doing that. I might be wrong, but I think they started doing that because they wanted to promote the Charlie Sheen show. Because they were going to build to a Charlie Sheen-Daniel Bryan match that never ended up happening. So that match fell through. Instead, Bryan faced Kane in a match kind of randomly at SummerSlam. And not really randomly, they had history. They were involved in that three-way feud for the WWE Championship like 2 months before this, so it really wasn't all that random. They had a good match. They were complete opposites, which is really why the chemistry worked. And Bryan, after he beat Kane clean that night, which I thought was really cool at the time, because, it was very rare for Bryan to get a clean victory as a heel, really for any heel to get a clean victory. I thought it was very refreshing to see that. I think it happened a lot on that show, too. I think Brock beat Triple H clean. The Miz beat Rey Mysterio clean. It was a very, heel-heavy show with clean victories. But anyway, Bryan beat Kane with a small package. And he has tried to get this over so many times in the last 7 years. He had tried this as recently, I think as late last year, with AJ Styles. During that feud with AJ right after he turned heel. Or no, actually, it might have been right before that. I think he beat Miz with a small package at the Super Showdown show in Australia late last year, and he wanted to be called Mr. Small Package again. But he first tried to get that over after he beat Kane with it at SummerSlam, and obviously it didn't really stick. We see a video of Bryan calling himself Mr. Small Package backstage, and it's just a great gimmick. And, perfectly fit for Bryan, and unfortunately they couldn't go further with it just because he ended up doing the thing with Kane. But that would have been a great gimmick for him, if only for, that short period of time. So anyway, Bryan and Kane did the anger management stuff. They filmed those vignettes. Bryan admits here that at first, he didn't really like the material. He didn't really like how it came out. He didn't really think it was all that funny. But they edited it and, kind of made magic out of it. And that was when he really started to like it, especially after the crowd reacted, very favorably to the way. I remember when it first aired on Raw in August of 2012. I thought it was one of the best things they had done on Raw in years. And the crowd felt the same way. It got a really positive reaction from people online at that point. And that was really the turning point for Bryan, where he felt, okay, maybe there's something more to this. Bryan really liked the part. I don't know if it was on that first vignette where they went to the anger management courses, or it was the next week. I don't remember. But during their anger management classes, Kane did that thing, and this was super memorable to me. I remember this like it was yesterday. Kane did this thing during the anger management course where he ran off all the things he's done wrong over the course of his life, obviously in character, but almost killing his brother, The Undertaker, killing his parents, burning down the house, the whole Katie Vick thing he alluded to, having a girlfriend, almost getting married to Lita, maybe kicking a baby. I don't remember if he brought that up, but he deadpanned this entire thing because it's therapy. So he went off on all the things that he felt made him a bad person, and all these other people are like, okay. And then Bryan's sitting there going crazy, does no one else see that he's the crazy one here and not me? It was just a great segment that just really fucking worked. Kane even says that Dr. Shelby, and I completely agree with this, was a very important piece, probably the most important piece of Team Hell No. Without Dr. Shelby, it probably would not have worked. Dr. Shelby, without even being the slightest bit of a wrestling fan and not really knowing the background of the Kane and Bryan story, made this work wonderfully. And everyone really involved in the entire thing, including Scorpio Sky, who played Harold in those segments. I'm sure you probably knew that, but yeah, Scorpio Sky was involved in these segments very heavily in late 2012. He never really got a contract out of it, but I think he was involved in, some TNA stuff a little before that, a little after it, but he never ended up landing a contract with WWE, shockingly enough. But anyway, Dr. Shelby was an amazing part of those Team Hell No segments, and without him, I don't think Team Hell No would have gotten over the same way that they did. Bryan said that he was very impressed with Dr. Shelby's layers of acting, how he can go from being very calm and very, therapeutic-like to just freaking the fuck out because, Kane and Bryan were fighting and he had to, stop it by yelling at him like two petulant children. They loved Dr. Shelby. I thought he was a great piece of those segments in the skit as well. They also talked about the skit in the diner, where I forgot what movie they were trying to reenact. They had done something similar with Kurt Angle and Christy Hemme in the build-up to WrestleMania 21. Maybe someone will let me know. I forgot the name of the movie. It's a very famous movie because they, in the build-up to 21, WrestleMania 21, they were doing all these famous movie reenactments because, WrestleMania was going to emanate from Hollywood or near Hollywood, California, whatever. And they did that movie. So Bryan and Kane did something similar in the segment at the diner, where Mae Young would look over, at them and seeing them go crazy, and Mae Young would go, "Oh, I'll have what they're having," or whatever. I think that was in the movie too. Kane says that they took up half of a diner to film this thing, and although the people around them were obviously all actors and they got their reactions, he really wanted the real reactions of the people that were on the other half of the diner, probably wondering what the hell they were doing. And he thought, they really should have filmed that and used that for this segment. I think that would have been comedy gold. They also discussed hugging it out on Raw, which was an unprecedented thing in Raw history where these two guys were voted on to hug it out. I think the crowd had three options. One, have a match. I don't know if the second one was to team up. I don't remember what the second one was. Maybe to have a handshake. I don't remember. The third option was to have a hug, to hug it out in the middle of the ring. And the crowd went nuts. And Bryan likes when he doesn't know what's going to happen. And I think I've heard Jericho say in various podcasts and interviews and stuff like that, that the, poll voting at that point, which they did a lot of when Raw went first 3 hours, just to kind of encourage people to stay tuned and to see, to stay interactive with the show. They did a lot of that. Jericho said that it was legitimate, that a lot of that was legitimate, and that I wouldn't doubt that. But I think this was real anyway. I think they were always going to go with the hug it out option. Kane says that the reaction that they got for hugging it out that night was the reaction that they needed, because without that reaction, without the people going crazy, Team Hell No would not have worked. Bryan said that it was one of his favorite moments. It was one of my favorite moments as a fan from 2012. It was a great Raw moment where, like, you think back of the all-time great Raw moments from, like the Beer Bash with Stone Cold Steve Austin, or, this guy coming back, Chris Jericho debuting on Raw. And then you have this moment. I wouldn't rank it in, like, the top 10 or anything, but I think it would be up there, definitely, maybe top 50 or whatever. It would definitely have to be an all-time great Raw moment because the crowd went nuts and they loved every second of this. And I completely agree. I thought this was an all-time great Raw moment. Kane knew at that point they were onto something with the reaction that they got for that segment. Bryan remembers, and this was a short time after the Hug It Out thing on Raw, that the Night of Champions match they had with then WWE Tag Team Champions Kofi Kingston and R-Truth, he remembered that as a very creative process because they had to find a way to tell a great story with these four guys. Kofi and R-Truth were kind of an afterthought, but Bryan and Kane were kind of forced together into this tag team going for the tag team titles, but they still had issues. I mean, they had hugged it out on Raw a few weeks before this, but they were still teasing tension between the two, so they had to find a way to tell this story where they weren't getting along, but they still had to coexist enough to where they would win the tag team titles. So in the end, I think Bryan, him and Kane were going back and forth. Kofi was out on the ground. Kane was going to the top rope. Bryan got angry at Kane, pushed him off from the side of the ring apron. Kane, falls down to the ground. He was very lucky he didn't crush Kofi's skull by landing on him or his chest or whatever. He landed right on top of him. Still, though, he landed right on top of him when he came off the top rope. And they got the 1, 2, 3, and they became the new WWE Tag Team Champions. And they actually said Vince was the one who came up with the I am the Tag Team Champions thing. And it drove Kane nuts because, I don't know if he majored in English or if he's just really good in English. I'm not sure. It drove Kane nuts because obviously grammatically it didn't make any sense. Bryan admitted it didn't make any sense, but Vince came up with it and it worked. It looked great on a t-shirt, but they didn't really know exactly what it meant, but it worked though because people still remember it, 7 years later. Anyway, so Bryan thought it was really, really fun. He thought it was a fun thing. He thought it was a funny thing. People would really get behind it. And then it was like a week after that they became tag team champions that they got called Team Hell No. So it was another one of those things where it was a fan poll vote where they had three options. It was teamwork, which is just so dumb that I thought it was funny. Bryan thought the same thing. Kane just thought it was beyond stupid. He thought that was the worst option of the three because it was completely ridiculous. Bryan liked it. They had Team Hell No, obviously, which ended up winning the vote, but they really wanted Team Friendship to win. Now, I know there's a tag team here in the Northeast with Sasha Banks' friend, Scotty Slade, and I forgot the other guy's name, but they were pretty prominent here in New England Championship Wrestling, Northeast Wrestling. They're definitely not together now. Like Mark something, I forgot his name. Mark Sherman and Scotty Slade had a team called Team Friendship that they were teaming up, I think, in like 2013. I remember seeing them right after the Team Hell No stuff, so it's not like they ran with us years later. I don't know if they were doing it before Team Hell No, but anyway, another team is doing it, obviously, Team Best Friends. Trent Reddish, Chuck Taylor kind of do something similar where they hug and they're called Best Friends. It really would have worked with Kane and Bryan, though, because they weren't best friends and they really had no semblance of friendship. And Bryan talked about how they had this whole idea for merch money, this line of t-shirts where they would make a lot of merch money. And on the shirts would be like these hand-drawn kid cartoonish figures of Kane and Bryan holding hands. And it would like have a rainbow behind them and they would call it Team Friendship. And it just never came to be. They thought it was really lame, the Team Hell No thing. I mean, I think it sticks because people still remember it years later. But hey, it was way better than some of the names. It's way better than some of the names they have today. And some of the names that we sometimes hear them come up with. Like the Kabuki Warriors, I just think that's dumb. I think Team Hell No was kind of clever because Bryan had the no thing. Kane was from Hell. So again, it made sense. But I can understand why they would see it as being lame. Anyway. They knew that the graduation ceremony that they had on Raw in early 2013, I want to say January, right before the Royal Rumble, the audience knew that was the end of this long journey that they had been on with Team Hell No since, September, late August, and they were kind of sad to see it end. But Kane praised the audience participation because without the audience and them being so, awesome with their participation. Like during the graduation ceremony, they called upon people to hug it out, including Michael Cole and Jerry Lawler, but also several members of the WWE Universe. And because they went along with it, the Team Hell No gimmick worked that much better. So I completely agree. I thought the audience played a big part in why Team Hell No worked, just as well as they did. They ended up losing the tag team titles at the Extreme Rules pay-per-view in May of 2013 to the Shield's Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. And both Bryan and Kane said that it felt good to lose the tag team titles. Not because they didn't, they wanted it to end or whatever, but for a few different reasons. One, for both of them, they knew that it was time for them to move on from the gimmick. And also because they felt that Rollins and Reigns were the right people to take on... Did I say Rollins and Reigns? Yeah, Rollins and Reigns were the tag team champions. They felt like it was the right time and that they were the right people for them to, take those championships away from Team Hell No. Bryan admitted there's some times where you don't want to lose a championship. You're really attached to it. You never want to lose a title. But in this case, it was the right time. It was the right way to, transition the championships from Team Hell No to the Shield. And Bryan also felt that was, it was time to kind of go on with his character, continue to evolve, that he was ready to break out in singles competition. And Kane compared it to a championship season where they had this awesome, 9-month run. They were tag team champions for a long time. They won the belts in September. They were champions for like 8 months. And now it was time to kind of pass the torch to the next team. So after the pay-per-view, they were told by WWE to cut this promo where they would say, oh, someone's got to stop the Shield, but like not them. They were just going to say like, oh, the Shield's unstoppable. Not us because we're too weak. We can't do it, but someone's got to stop them. Bryan and Kane thought that was stupid. So they changed up the material. And they changed it to where Bryan said he was freaking out over losing the tag team titles. And he said that he wasn't the weak link. And that stuck, and it worked. And they didn't really necessarily break up Team Hell No, but they had some issues. And Bryan had to prove himself in not being the weak link. And he transitioned from a comedy character with that to, a perennial main event player by not winning Money in the Bank, but competing in Money in the Bank, and then later the WWE Championship match at SummerSlam. So it all came full circle for Bryan, where he felt like he wasn't the weak link, and he proved that by becoming WWE Champion just a few short months later. The time period with that, the whole process, I thought worked perfectly, because Bryan was so over and people were ready to see him in the main event, and they wasted no time. They put him right in the main event by SummerSlam 2013. And that was really what catapulted him into the main event scene. I mean, granted, he won the title a few times. He dropped it. He was back in the mid-card for a while. Had to prove himself all over again for WrestleMania 30, which is exactly what he did. Went on to become a World Heavyweight Champion in the main event of WrestleMania 30, which was awesome. Kane said that it was the right time for Bryan to break out and that it was the right time for them to go their separate ways. And then Bryan also praises Kane, saying that he's had a legendary career and that he really enjoyed his time, teaming with him back in 2012, 2013. And he said that for as legendary as Kane is inside the ring, that Glenn, who portrays Kane, is an even better person. So when the day comes that Kane gets inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, which you have to know is coming sooner rather than later, hopefully, it would be cool if Bryan was the one to do the induction. I could see it being Undertaker just because of the history, but if it's not going to be Taker, which I don't think it would be, I think it should be Daniel Bryan just because of how they are good friends outside of the ring and for all the history they've had inside the ring as well. But anyway, that does it for this edition of WWE Untold. Again, 2 different titles here. It's called On the Network, Team Hell No is on fire. But I think in the title card for the show, they called it Team Hell No Catches Fire. Either way, it was a great show. Be sure to check it out. Clocks in at around 24, 25 minutes. But well worth the watch. Some great, some of the stuff I already knew, but like some behind-the-scenes thoughts and stuff from Daniel Bryan and Kane on the whole Team Hell No shtick from that period in time, and I thought it was very entertaining. So thank you guys for checking out the video. Very much appreciated. Be sure to like this video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll be back with another new Network and Shield tomorrow, breaking down the Chronicle, the all-new Chronicle episode on Seth Rollins that aired after TakeOver on Saturday. Until then, guys, enjoy SummerSlam tonight. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.